This is the nonprofit news feed, of course, brought to you by Whole Whale. My name is George Weiner. I'm the chief whaler of Whole Whale, a marketing analytics agency for nonprofits. But you listen to this podcast, you probably know that. And of course, we have Nick Azouay, digital strategist at Whole Whale. We're both huge nonprofit news geeks. So, like, literally, this is just what we do for fun, and we just like press record. We would probably be just like talking about the stuff anyway, but we have a number of things to cover today. LA wildfires, information about Mastodon, and some other information. Let's jump into it, Nick.
Yeah, George, we got a good one today. We want to start at the top talking about the LA wildfires. So, ABC News reports that thousands of firefighters have been battling wildfires across 45 square miles of LA County. 88,000 people are under mandatory evacuation orders, thousands more under evacuation warnings. The Palisades fire and Eaton fires have together destroyed over 12,000 structures and burned 37,000 acres. And I think at time of writing, at least yesterday, the fires were only kind of minimally contained. So this is kind of the big one for LA. A couple threads we wanted to pull here is that NPR reports that local organizations have really stepped up to fill the need. They talk about a group called the Community Group for K-Town for All, has been working with local YMCAs, and they've created this kind of like supply chain network of donated goods and supplies that they're quickly mobilizing across the county. They're also working with nonprofit organizations like Covenant House, which has historically helped immigrants and kind of like at-risk individuals with housing, but they're providing shelter for individuals impacted. And they say that the volunteer surge has been phenomenal. They talk about people taking off work to volunteer with organizations. I think for LA, George, this is kind of, I mean, very different, right? But it's an all hands on deck. It's like 9/11 or Hurricane Sandy to New York, right? Life kind of stops and everyone's kind of pitching in. So it's really incredible to see that. And then on the corporate philanthropy side, George, we see that Airbnb.org, which is actually a distinct tax exempt 501c3 charity associated with Airbnb, has announced that they're donating emergency housing for over 25,000 people impacted by the LA wildfires. That was actually on top of the announcement that they were donating 65 emergency housing donations that they announced last week. So we're really seeing kind of a very quick ramp up, not only, of course, from the tremendous work of the firefighters, but from the social impact sector to support people in crisis. George, you're based in California. I'm sure that you kind of know folks who are affected. What do you make of this and how the nonprofit social impact communities responded?
You don't come here for news or for live updates. We are, yeah, definitely closer. We have staff that are in LA. I have friends that are in LA. I have people that have fled their homes. As with many, am in my family circles impacted by this. This is probably going down as the largest in terms of dollar cost disasters in America. Two threads that I want to pull on, especially for executive leadership of nonprofits, is really take this page and study it. What is happening in the local communities, hopefully, and what we are starting to see is the networked response of nonprofits coordinating together to enact what is going to have to be one of the biggest rebuilds in American history. So to do that, those conversations don't have to you don't have to wait for the fire. You don't have to, you know, I hope it never happens here. Look, extreme weather patterns are going to continue to happen. So my question to you, local, national, regional organizations that operate, what is your emergency response plan? And more importantly, how is it going to coordinate with others, especially, I'll just be honest, on the fundraising front? How do you put up a united front of saying this is a coordinated action with us already signed on to respond so that you can, frankly, capitalize on that moment of compassion, which is short, burns brightly, but is able to produce that type of funding in the moment that you're going to need for the sustained efforts. So, what is that collaboration networked response to the disasters that are most probably going to happen in your regional areas. Be ready for those. How are the YMCA's, habitats, Girl Scouts all working together in these moments? How are those programs able then to also coordinatedly and agree to fundraising, which can be awkward, but can be very powerful because then it's like, oh, this is the united response for supplying this area. That is incredibly powerful. The other one, maybe you can touch on, is the Act Blue. Can you give me? Yeah, look, there's no shortage of corrosive political narratives right now. This is a Rorschach test for, you know, who would you like to blame for a natural event? Go for it, right? Can I get your attention by trying to stoke anger and outrage? And it's again this terrible Rorschach test instead of a how do we help test. And maybe you can explain the Act Blue because there is something important inside of that silliness.
Yeah, George. Normally we wouldn't report out, right? Kind of like a politicized scuffle happening on Twitter, but this expands way beyond Twitter and I think really gets to something important. And the backstory of this is that politicians like Gavin Newsom, Elizabeth Warren, and quite frankly, the hosts of Pod Save America, a popular progressive podcast, created relief funds that raise money for local organizations such as the LA Firefighters Department Foundation, and local community groups, right? These are funds, the money goes to them. But right-wing critics and news outlets fiercely criticize the use of Act Blue to raise money. And you had this narrative going so far as to accuse all these people of profiting off the fires, which they are not. They were all impacted, right, George? Pod Save America, they're based in LA. They had staff that lost houses. That was obviously not what happened. And furthermore, the fundraisers were set up via Act Blue Charities. Act Blue Charities is distinct from the Act Blue PAC. It's itself a 501c3 organization, and it helps a platform that people can easily use to donate to causes and disperse funds across organizations, right? So all of this is very above board, but it created a firestorm of Democrats trying to profit off of this. People talking about, oh, they're skimming 4% off the top. George, that's just bank and credit card transaction fees, right? And I think the takeaway from this is that amid declining social trust, nonprofits have to stay vigilant and proactively identify and mitigate risks of the harms associated with bad optics. It's not fair that people were tearing down this fundraiser, but we have to kind of think in this battle mentality, I think, about protecting our brand and making sure that we're doing everything possible to, in moments of crisis, stay the course, seem apolitical. That's what people want. And kind of do risk management from there. What do you think this parable kind of tells us, George?
This is important because it's medium is the message moment with regard to the platform. The truth is, Act Blue is the progressive go-to fundraising platform. And yes, there is a C3 side, but I'll tell you, it is not exactly the bastion of right wing or right leaning nonprofits using it. Technically, yes, it is nonpartisan. But if you are on the right wing side, you're using WinRed and WinRed Charities, which is the other side of it. And when, we're talking about transparency and things like that, Act Blue's 3.95% is on the higher side of the market, on average above 1.28%, above an average of 2.6 for the market. However, when you factor in extra costs that are associated with groups like Classy or Neon or other major fundraising platforms, there are other costs associated with it. So that might make it more competitive. But on the surface, right, if we're talking about transparency, when you're doing a national fundraiser for a moment like this, the medium is the message, the transparency of this is the fee that's being taken. And by the way, that fee does go toward a progressive focused platform. The politicization of your platform actually kind of matters, right? The tech you're using, if it falls into that bucket, that should be a little voice in the back of your mind. We should have something that is neutral, that is open to everyone, that is not and does not fall into that type of suspect. Because it is true, right? If you are a Republican and you're like, wait a minute, why would I donate to this thing? Because 4%, 3.96% of that money is going to go toward a progressive leaning platform, like their tech goes to progressive causes. I see the thread. The medium is the message. Pay attention, right? Here's the other lesson I'm seeing is like, pay attention to the platforms you're using because it sends a message, right?
Yeah, George, absolutely. And I think it's not entirely dissimilar from how we might talk to a client about the risks and benefits associated with using a platform like Twitter that's increasingly being seen as a highly politicized platform, and the risks of other technologies. It's no secret, George, that tech is kind of throwing around its political weight, especially within the past couple months. And the politicization of these platforms for your audiences, it matters. Those optics, they do matter. So um, I'm inclined to kind of side that no one did anything innately malicious here.
No,
That being said, you need to consider risk if you're an organization, and in just this environment. And maybe it's unfortunate, but it's the reality we're in. So I absolutely agree with you.
yeah. So again, here, if you're a nonprofit, you're thinking about your networked collaborative response toward probabilistic disasters in your area. Have those conversations, have those statements ready, have your fundraising like ready to roll. This by no means will be the last, emergency of the year. We're just kicking it off. And number two, the fundraising platform medium is the message. That is not going to change over the next 4 years. We're going to see increased politicization. Don't be surprised when you go outside and it's raining and you get wet. Be prepared and consider that how it comes off the communication. Those two are the things that are just like, that seems true to me and useful to me as opposed to other that I have seen being talked about regarding these fires.
Yeah, George, I absolutely agree. All right, George, I'll take us into our next story. And we want to talk about this reporting from TechCrunch and others that Mastodon announces a major restructuring to decentralize control. In particular, they're going to establish a new nonprofit organization based out of Europe that will take ownership of key platform components and a significant shift away from kind of the individual control of the founder. So this restructuring follows last year's creation of a US-based nonprofit with Twitter co-founder Biz Stone on the board and aims to differentiate Mastodon from the CEO-controlled social networks like those run by Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. What do you think about this, George? This is real interesting.
The nonprofit structure has to its advantage transparency. It has in its core the public benefit. And, what does that actually look like from a legal standpoint? Well, one, there's no sort of super shareholder making a ton of money, right? There's no Elon Musk at the top of this thing sort of, squeezing it. There's no Mark Zuckerberg operating for shareholder value. That is it. This myth of like shareholder value is the only value that matters in the world. Nonprofits play by better rules and are more transparent because that profit is not just sort of sucked up by a market that's insatiable for capital growth at all costs. That is good. The structure inside of it, I think it's taking a bit of a leap of being like, nonprofit governance is perfect. And it's like, you still have to design it. It's a tax code. Okay. Right. You solve one of those things with regard to transparency. Mastodon as a technical platform has been around for a while, right? It's well tested right now. I'd say Blue Sky. Blue Sky is actually sort of seemingly taking the mantle of like that Twitter replacement. But I'll say where I park Mastodon in my mind is that at some point I'm going to create a local social network for my kids when they come of age with the community and with the school and with their friends. I'm going to create a localized, managed on my own server system. I am not a unique little brilliant snowflake. I think other people are realizing that there is upside to owning a platform that is not trying to predate on attention of my kids. And that is something I'm going to build, own, and operate. And I believe other people will probably, as nodes, probably do the same thing where like, hey, as great as it is on, Instagram that they have our grandparents on lock because they want to see pictures of their kids. And like, that's the relationship we have. I think micro networks are probably a long-term smart bet for a part of our social needs as communities. And that's where I see Mastodon fitting in. It's solid tech. It's just not a Twitter, right? It's just different. So I'm excited to see this change. This is one of those like small things. Did you see it in the corner of your eye? Like, oh, it didn't matter. But that's what the geeks are for. That's what nonprofit geeks are for.
I love that. Eager listeners might know that George is a bit of a builder. So that
I
comes as
tinker.
no surprise to me. But George, we have an interesting one. This was first written in the blog, the academic blog site, The Conversation, but it's about a marine science nonprofit that has elected, quote, the ocean as a member of its board. So the Scottish Association for Marine Science has taken an unprecedented step by making the ocean a official trustee on its board. And it's joining legal innovations that grant, quote, personhood to natural entities in countries like Ecuador and New Zealand. The move was spearheaded by director Nicholas Owens and aims to shift away from purely human-centric decision-making in marine research and development. So the practical details are being finalized. The ocean needs to be represented by someone, whether it's a group or individual. But it challenges traditional governance models and could impact the Institute's research priorities and emphasize the quote unquote particular interests of the sea when it comes to deep sea exploration. And they say it may affect short term financial performance, right? I guess the ocean, not particularly great at fundraising. But George, speaking of boards and governance, this seems like a cool, innovative, maybe a little risky, maybe a little out there way to really ensure that the primary beneficiary of your organization actually has a say. So this seems cool. What do you think?
Yeah, the stakeholder representation on the board is not new in the nonprofit sector for a long time. It has often been a best practice to include members of the community that you support in the and at the decision-making table. Like that is exactly like a best practice. The inclusion of a sort of like a non-person category is awesome. I love it. And because I am such a geek, you know exactly where my head goes here is like, who should represent this? I believe an AI who's been trained and is updated and gets like, curated. But like, I think it would be tremendous to have AI Ocean on your board. And AI Ocean is, clearly filled with facts that you can load it with a retrieval augmented generation. So you can have a localized database of the things that you understand, right? The people that say like, hey, here are the ocean's interests, not just making it up. Here are the ocean's interests. What do you think on this? And then if you really want to, put your chips on the table, say like, all right, AI, how would you vote on this issue? And that would be interesting. That would be interesting. I wouldn't let her run the organization, but what if, at least as a consulting, I wouldn't put it on your board, but what if, here's a thought experiment for the boards out there. You put, especially if it is a non-human, like if you have humans, use the humans, please. But if we're helping the trees, if we're helping abstract ideas, entities, and causes, put them on the board in the form of an AI, train that AI. I would love to, I would build this for free for someone just because if you were going to take it seriously, I know exactly how to build this thing. I think it would be helpful.
Amazing. I could hear the gears turning.
God, see the slow smoke out of my head.
No, I love it so much. That'd be so cool, right? And I think, George, the personification of intangible goals, I think does serve a real purpose and, helps the public engage with it, right? Maybe you have like hey, on the ocean bot, like type in your question about the ocean and hear what the ocean has to say about XYZ clean water intervention or whatever.
Local animals or plants
Exactly.
or, all of it.
Hey,
You're like, yeah, well, that's interesting.
yeah, what do the koalas in Australia think? I think you're onto something, George. And speaking of the environment, our last story and our feel good story is about an organization called the Park People, a Denver based nonprofit that's accepting applications through February 15th through their Denver Digs Trees program. And they are providing trees at extremely reduced costs, $35 each or $10 in low canopy areas with 3 options available for those in need. George, I live in New York, and the temper differential in the summer in New York City can almost perfectly be mapped to tree density, which can almost perfectly be mapped to socioeconomic status. And this is not just an environmental justice issue, it's a racial justice issue, it's a socioeconomic justice issue. So it's amazing to see a nonprofit stepping up and helping get trees to people who really, really can benefit from them.
Love it. I'm a huge fan of gardening and planting. I'd want to take a look at like what kind of trees we talking about here, or like, the spiked oak stuff. I can't stand at all, but you know, there's a lot of upside here to planting more trees, not just from an environmental, but from like a quality of life standpoint. 100%. All right. You have a joke in here that you were
George,
very thrilled about. This guy is
I
so
was,
thrilled. He's like, wait till you see this joke. So let's see what
all
we
right,
got.
George, how did the startup tree nonprofit raise so much money?
I, I don't know. It grew it.
Seed funding.
He did it. He did it.
Touchdown.
Totally landed. All right. Seed funding. Yes. That's exactly what we expected. Yep.
Mhm.
All right, Nick. Thank you for bringing us the news, and I'll see you next time.
See you later, George. Thanks.